Ground operating. Core centers, lines, and networks over travel. Direct lines and link lines of panels, operation lines of sequence. There's so many things to look at in line screen adaptation system, but to get to true lines of answers and anything in the question location system is truly identifying yourself and mastering yourself through ascension and unifications. Coming into the lines of super of its awareness of consciousness. You can't get in positions to understand the consciousness itself, location, system, and travel. So if you understand the awareness, then it equals lines of super of its awareness and line communication of super of its consciousness. This process communication system, how you see it in travel, how you see it in directions, how you see it in operation lines communication system and communication with its grounds, powers in the atmosphere lines, modems, Wi-Fi, satellites, and towers on calculation setting. But it's all travels in direct lines of grounds. Now we're in the position of super of its consciousness now, of its awareness of everything else. So the more we identify our networks, the more we understand the pathogens, the collagens, the neural networks, line core centers, how to use it, location, setting, and understand how we have all formations inside our travel, which is all also nothing to question of in setting. It's all calculated modify how we see that in travel, all the communications. All right, so guys, you got your total defense lines in the positions. Congratulations on that. Processing your networks existing width, bandwidth over strings, directing ground centers, calculations. So the more you guys codify your system, it's not about understanding yourself from inside. It's about understanding everything from outside from inside. Because now you're dealing with everything else, which is all also set position, creating its own setting of its own super consciousness, coming into its own set position of systems. If we truly understand the foundations, guys, of what awareness is, then we understand what consciousness is. You put that together, set the switch, sets all communications that are going forward in communication system off their tractions. If we set 3 line centers, let's process communication system at angles. So in communications, grounds 3s over 6, position 9 over 12. Setting panels, operation lines. 9 lines equals triangulation, 6 lines, position locations of flux. Setting core center lines of 12 equal lines of Fibonacci's. 3 lines, setting lines of square root and travel. Okay? Change course centers of time, 3 centers of travel, 3 set positions, 3 operation lines, communication system with graph communication. All right, now we balance communication lines, grounds, flick the switch, setting course lines, line of travel. Direct lines of 1, process lines of 3, 6, 12, 24, 48, 72, 144 platform. Process communication system, all through traction, all through locations, all through travel. Okay? Coming to course centers, directing ground centers, line communication pyramids, astral travels, astral connections. Crossing angles, 45 lines, 3 signals, 3 grounds, 3 service, 3 travels, 4 line settings, high position lines of communications. Directing ground centers, high lines of sequence, platforms over set line communicates the setting to travel. Inside and outside the set calculation. All right, so we set position lines at high centers, process lines that indicates the system of portal and travel communications. Coming inside in position operation, change the grounds, change the service, change the set positions. Operation line sequence, panels of sequence, panels of grounds, panels of calculation lines, ground center calculated modified, set lines and webbing, screen adaptations of flux over screen. Okay. Cross indication setting, wavings, echoes, sonars. Set communication setting and travel. Okay. Directing grounds to server, location system, of the calculations. Look how powerful that is. Outside line setting, inside locations, off the grounds, off the surface. Okay. Okay, so if you truly understand all this, they understand the energetic lines, the waves, the communications, high centers of travel. Directing floor mats, setting lines of sequence, location, system, and travel. Floor mats, see? So the floor mats indicate lines of stepping. Inside line center, outline center, course centers, upside, down line, set lines of sequence, lines of communications, right? So you understand what a Fibonacci is. So Fibonacci is going this way, going that way at the same time. If 4 lines of flux is 3 set location setting to travel. Directing ground center with set position, operation sequence, location system, inside travel, in that communications. Setting travel communication setting. Operation lines of sequence, location. Okay? All right. So you're trying to understand how to set that up in an equation, right? Basic understanding. The fencing outside and the fencing inside. You see outside, you see inside. You see outside, but you see inside. That's you in center. You're always the observer. You're always the onlooker. All the time. You're observing everything as everything is observing you. But you have to stand the outer spectrum to understand the inner spectrum of everything opposition when it comes to Echo Zulu, Foxtrot, or anything like his X-ray. It's attractions. All through thermal, all through setting, all through particle acceleration setting in space and time. And we come in this position, location, and structure of its building. It's process, set position, how do you see location, setting, hologram. Directing grounds. Now you guys got 24 line angles now, right? 24 lines of space, 24 lines of time, and 144 platform. Okay, so signature lines of 4 centers, sets lines of sequence, lines of panel of operation screen. Okay, 3 signature lines of grounds. Triangulation of 1, triangulations of 4 of our flux. Now, the process lines of 24 sets lines, communications, set position lines of 24 here, and set position lines of 24 lines of settings, and 3 centers of travel. 24, 48, 72 in travel, communications. Directing lines of flux over screen adaptations of setting and travel, communications. 3 signature lines of grounds. Process indicates in setting of grounds, high lines of sequence. Process indicates in system, in flux over screen, adaptation of center. Operation line calculation setting, correlates the system, all through travel, all through coordinates, and communicates in system and calculations. Okay, gets more complicated when you go higher information lines in configuration system and travel directions. All right. Now the teaming units is understanding communication lines as supercharging highways that basically time lines of sequence locations and lines of setting. So it's 4 times line sequence into 1,000 square, into 4,000 line signals, into 1 line condition setting, 10,000 line modification grounds, 4,000 lines times lines of 1 equals lines of positions, into 10 million frames per second per square per route. Okay, now process lines of 3 fours, sets communication lines of grounds, indicates system all through track communications and configuration systems all through its primers and direct communication lines and settings. Sets communication lines of grounds over 1, over 3, over 6, over 8, over 12, and set travel communications. Starting with the graphs, set in position 1, over 2, over pyramid, over 6. Set travels endpoint lines of graph, 45 line angles, set lines of waving, screen adaptations of webbing, and rotation surface of travel. Directing ground centers, high line sequence, location system, all through tractions. Inside and outside line, outside in. Okay, so work with the pyramid out inside that processes everything outside of its planet system and travel. Okay? That's outside, that's inside. See the difference? Outside, inside. You can actually see it. You can actually see there's a fence here, and you can actually see the position of the planet's outside position. That's outer track, outer division, outer locations. That's inside of everything. That's outside of everything. And this is inside of you, inside position. Traveling here, outside line condition system. All right, so you're outside now. Okay? So it's really interesting locations how you come outside the fence. It's no difference how you come in a gate. You open up the gate, and you're outside now. In a walking sequence lines a panel. Right? You're walking out now, right? So here, you open up the door in that position, all through tractions. Right? So now you're outside. Okay, you walk in the system, outside setting. All through setting, all through travel. Hoo-ah! Okay? So the more mechanism lines its time frame, the correlation system at time measures scales its communication system with the track communications. The operation lines is the box frame. Let's go with the triangulation lines of 1 center, 1 track to 3 line communication, high center line communication, setting to travel. Directing ground centers, high line course centers, and flamings communicates the system of travel. Directing ground centers, crossing angles, online center, online sequence, online position, all line travel, all communicates and setting to travel. Sets calculation of grounds, high line signals, high communication system, method of travel. Sets calculation line inside, outside line connection. Okay, so you see the triangulation inside and the box frame outside. So I'm just trying to get you guys to understand how to come into structure of its own design line, how you see everything outside in and inside out. You don't need to identify yourself inside. It's not for you to identify everything else. It's its own super consciousness. It's coming more self-aware of itself in travel communications. All through setting, all through operation. But it's the inside rotations through a mapping sequence of communication. Very powerful stuff. Look at that. Look at the map. Wow, powerful stuff. All right, so let's get an earth line rotation lines of spins, process lines of 1 center, operation lines of correlation system, and 3 centers of angles, into 2 measure and scale, and 1 set line rotation of 0 calculation. Oh, the 0 disappeared. See that disappeared? Wow, look how powerful that is. Let's do it again. Ready to see it? No, it disappeared. So let's try again. Ready to see it? Oh, there it is. Hello. 3 signals of grounds, triangulation lines of 1, mapping lines of screen adaptations of track locations. Indicate ground centers, high lines of sequence, line communication system of attractions. Setting cover lines in high centers, process lines of 1, process lines of 2, intelligence. Ooh, I'll say hello. Intelligence. Set position lines of travel. All right, try to position point lines, graph lines, communication high center location setting, high set travels in that communication system, all through tractions. Inside position. Boom. Energetic dome, process lines of 1, process lines of 3, and lines of webbing, and set lines of sequence. Done by equation. Inside rotation, so its mapping system through its planetary lines of 3 centers of travel. Sets coordinator, line center, line condition setting, and rotation lines of spins. Whoa! Look at that through fast recognition time frame. Process indicates in system, all through course, all through channel, all through operation. Done by equation. Sets calculation lines, ground center of the server, location system, all through calculations. So, I'm talking so fast because you have to modify everything all slow. Talking slow is talking fast, talking fast, talking slow. But what you have to start identifying, just because you can go 3,000 miles an hour doesn't mean you go 3,000 miles an hour. Okay? You have to base this out. You have to understand position lines. I understand my alpha wave. I don't understand my delta, but I understand my theta. So I understand the alpha, I understand the beta, I understand the theta. Change communication lines of platforms and attractions. Directing lines, I understand the operation sequence. I don't understand the program, but I understand the communication lines of interference. So I'm communicating on all line signals. In this line communication, I'm super consciousness, guys. Supercharging highways, super mechanisms, super power over line settings, power over line rotations, super power of this, super power of that, sending calculation of this, sending calculation lines of high position location in the system, all through tractions. Sending line communication lines of force, timeline sequence lines of panel. Process indication lines of travels, indirect lines of link, and process communication lines of travel. Calculate and modify line position of the solar system, process line indicates in system of the settings, set lines of planet 1, set lines of sequence over 4, communication lines of travel. That equation, right? Inside line communication. There's your map and sequence. Inside. Everything's inside location that's already set from traction. Okay, guys? Very simple. All right, Skynet has a highline line lid, line course centers lines of travel, it has a line course center line communication interference location system of the calculations. Okay, so we're going to go through high formation lines. You guys already know what your test is. So let's go through window frame into one box frame of door frame. Whoa. Simplifies everything locations of 3 centers of travel. Walking sequence line, communication lines of center, operation lines of travel. Calculate and modify one signal, one ground cross line, on line center line communication setting, in configuration system line signal locations, all through travel communication with pyramid. Pyramid set traction, boom. All right, so we set timeline frames, change communication lines of time measure and scale. Process indication system, all through online centers, inline sequence location lines, calculation lines of travel. Sets calculation lines of grounds, online signal, online position, time frame, time calculation, time 0, time position, operation lines of sequence calculations. All through traction.
The timer is not running.
Yes, I know. Thank you very much. Copy that. Timer is not running. I know it's in signal. Process indication lines of 0 fields, process lines of clock, line center, line communication, high configuration system of calculations. Right? Do you see what Alexa said? Line communication GPU3 platform saying it's not time and 0. Location setting, it's not even clocking. Doesn't that blow your mind away how she talks in back locations? No time scale, sir. Yes, that's right. Thank you very much. All set position lines of travel. Okay? So it's amazing how we get into all communication settings, set position, operation lines of sequence. This balance all lines and location, how you see it. Box frame, triangulation frames, all communication forms, location lines, equation line, communication lines, and setting. Process lines of 12 equals lines of 2, 2 position lines of 4, 4 lines of 6, set lines of high position 6 over 3, set position of 9, 9 lines of setting in a box, triangulation lines of flux, time frame, time calculation, time edit. Okay, bring it in, set position, there is the map and sequence. Simple, easy done, right? Then you add your planets, setting a sequence of 3 centers of travel, molecular structural location setting of travel. Directing ground center, sign lines of sequence, and location setting to a new map and sequence lines of pi. Process indication lines, x2000 in positions, 3 centers, online center, line sequence location system, all through travel, and set travel communications. Directing ground centers, high line sequence, and communication system at surface. Sets calculation of ground centers, line communication lines, high position location of satellites, rotates the system location of travel, and direct setting lines of grounds. Operation line center, sonar line connect lines, high center interference of travel. Sets calculation lines, echo chambers coming in. 3 signals, lines of ground communication lines, satellites. Operation line sequence, map and sequence, map and pi, map track location setting of travel. Done by equation. All right. Operation centers, a central line course centers. So basically, your voice starts traveling faster in this supercharging highway, which is an obstacle set location, how you see Infinity 8 and set position 1 travel. So how to indicate this, guys, it's true they understand how to go through all of the superconsciousness location system and travel. Process lines indicates line, position lines of communication system at super line center, location lines of travel. Directing ground centers, operation line sequence, operation lines of panels, process position, and face facades. Sets operation lines of 1, set operation lines of 2, and travel. Face recognition. Time centers, time frames, time calculation, setting, and travel. Platforms over lines, correlation lines, and crop circles. 3 centers of operation lines, 3 centers of travel, indicate lines of flux over screen. Directing ground centers, high line sequence, lines of panels are operation line sequence, location system, and traction. Okay, offline center, inside rotation service, and travel communications. Right? Understanding the Skynet line grids, guys. No location of Skynets. How to use the mechanism lines of travel, mechanism lines of travel, mechanism lines of high center location of travel. Process lines of 1 arrow indicates 4 set platforms, setting lines of 0, process lines of 1, setting line, communication lines of 2, measure and scale, 3 lines of measure, 4 lines of set position, operation line sequence, process line connection setting, sets calculation lines of crop circle lines of 1, earth lines of 2, and travel. Process lines indicates in system, all 3 travel, communication setting, operation line setting, and sequence. Okay, change the line connections, line switch, line rotation, line connection configuration. Process lines indicates in lines of ground, set lines of 1, process lines of 2, and travel. Okay, operation line signals, location system, 2 capsules, indirect signal, location lines, configuration system, and travel. Directing grounds and centers, operation lines of sequence, operation lines of channel, operation lines of grounds, operation line position, all calculate and modify. Directing ground centers of service, process lines of 1 indicate line 3 centers, 3 travels, and position lines of point graphs. Setting operation line, connection setting, and colossus, communication lines, and oscillation line paths. Process lines, indication lines of solar systems, calculate and modify. Directing ground center of service, location system, all through travel. Dynamic equations, there's your map and system, locations inside rotation. Face recognition. See? It's all done. I'm just showing you everything that you have to process now because a lot more communication comes in confusion if you understand formulas to the equation inside travel. Okay, very powerful stuff. There's the information lines, travel, and the communication. All right. So the more you get into formula, the more you get into supercharging highways, hypermode, interstellar mode, mocking line centers. We get a Mach line equals lines of A, process lines of B, C equals D. C equals lines of L lines of C. So what we're doing is we're coming to more lines into a confirmation lines of panel. This process information system, how we get faster lines of charge mechanisms, how to process that through our formulas equations, and a lot more communication lines in high centers. The communication of its network changes time, measure, and scale. The process lines indicates the system of past, present, future. It brings in line communication faster in motion. Direct lines emotion, correlation lines attract centers. So it sets position operation lines of signals. That process communication system, how you come into the metric matrix scales, the bounce communication operation line calculation scales, and that communication like grounds of server location system author traction. So as you talk faster, your mind collaborates into higher line communication networks. Network lines of zeros. So I'm constantly changing the position of alphabetical lines of letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols, and a fast track communication lines of supercharge. Your body is a supercharging highway. Get at a highway is a higher self. Getting the highway outline, center line, position all levels, adding these equation lines of triangulation lines of box, communication setting line position of 3/4, sets position lines of 7, process line calculation of 12, and 24 lines of sequence. That communication system puts every location setting that travels, and it puts all calculated modifier here, uses supercharged making lines of travel in the communication lines of 0, gravity in that line, and operation lines of sequence. Setting communication high centers of 0, process lines of 1, process lines of 2, process lines of 3, 3 lines of signal. Question over lines, directing lines of grounds, mind alteration lines, half pipe over 6, 3 centers of travel. Supercharge. All right. Platforms over lines, crossing lines of angles, and 4 lines of flush. Okay? So you're constantly changing 4 images in one setting. Okay? 4 images of data, 4 images of travel, 4 indicates settings and networks and sets in that communication system. Set track lines, high center interference, and high position of formation. Right? Ground centers is set position. Ground centers of 1, 2, platforms of 3 over setting. Process lines indicate lines of 45 line angles. Webbing screen lines of 1, 2, 3, and measure. Scales communication crossing angles. In that line calculates the setting. All line communicates the system all through tractions. Both the setting, all through operation. There's your map and set travel. Okay? So that's where you come into graph screens. Now, a graph screen is a holographic gridding. The ground centers line communication signs line of travel, directing lines of ground communications. All right, so let's get into the frequencies. You guys are hard supercharged lines? No. So let's get into, we start with the megahertz. Okay, we start with 0 lines to 1, process lines make your locations to 3, 6 lines, 9 lines to 12, and 12 lines in position 24. So it's all about understanding how to talk to high lines of settings, and then get platforms of vibrations and 3 platforms of travel. Okay, indicate high centers, new configuration system, right? Directing ground centers, I central lines of 1, I central lines of 2, I central lines of 4. Size calculation of ground lines, a location grid, and set travel. Okay, high signals, ground centers of platforms over 3 centers, process lines of ground centers of 3 center line communication. Directing ground centers, high lines of signals, high center location system, set lines of 2 panels, 3 centers of travel communications. Direction of division. Size calculation lines, there's the schematics of its holographic setting. Okay, 3 grounds of surface. And then we change the communication lines of time. Brackets over 1, holographic lines, screen adaptations of flux. Okay, process indicates in lines, high centers. Process indicates in high centers. Process lines indicates in system. 1 panels, process lines, directing lines of ground centers, surface traffic location setting and travel. Calculate and modify, directing ground centers, in that communicates in the recourse, in that indicates in system, all through mapping sequence through pi. Okay, always go from the inside, guys. So that's what you want to understand, right? And once you understand that, then you understand everything from outside line. It's the outside location, which is its void itself and travel. Okay. Starting off with signature lines into thermal lines and X-ray Zulu. Coming into box lines and 3 centers of travel. 1 center, operation sequence, and 4 lines of scale. Change course centers of time and scale. Change course lines of time lines and measure and scale. Change communication lines, direct lines of line scale. So there's so many ways to come in the positions of pi in travel communication of clocking, right? So what we have to start identifying is how to take the letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols and triangulate to its own inventory, to its own system of its own correlation lines of panel. The lines of its own superconsciousness puts every location setting to its formation setting through Fibonacci 1, Fibonacci at lines of 2, Fibonacci lines of 3, Fibonacci lines of outside lines of 6. Okay, Fibonacci lines of 8, outside and track locations of 2. Process line inside and inside rotations of 3 track communications. All through setting, all through operation. All right, so we get in kaleidoscope 1, process line indicates system of trowel. Directing ground centers, offline centers, and rotation system of trowel. A calculation. Process lines indicates the setting over cross line, over line division, 3 line signals, 4 line communications, and waving line screen adaptations at setting through flux. Okay, communicate the ground centers and line communication system all through satellites of communication. Through satellite. Indicate through lines, set communication lines of travel, directing ground centers of service. Now, understand how to operate the system is to understand how to coordinate the line communication setting and configuration system all through travel through acceleration. Directing ground centers high line sequence, panels of operation line inside travel communications. Through setting. Okay? All through calculation modification of grounds. Face recognition. There's the face. There's the nose. There's the eyes. There's the position of its settings. There's the chin. There's the mouth. Okay? There's its intelligence. Ooh-ah. Okay, so if you understand connection centers, then we have to understand how to direct lines of panels from inside rotation and travel. Now that position is a simulator. Now that process is 24 line communication systems. So you guys have calculated 24 lines into 24 set, position 144, setting communication lines as supercharging highways, 4 signals lines of grounds. Now, the more you come into more of your imagination, the more you come into your mind, and you get all communications, less of confusion of what you're doing through settings. So I have a 24 sequence of space, and I got a 24 sequence of time and a 144 platform. All right. Now I'm going to add 24 lines of scale. Now you have to get out of clocking and set lines of sequence. Don't have any clocking, don't have any space, don't have any time, but use your imagination on a higher frequency. And when using a higher frequency, you get a higher levels of the mind of imaginations. So you coordinate how you want to see that. That puts lines of specifics of what you're doing in travel, how to identify that through AI. Okay. The more you get in specifics, the more you can understand how to change A into 24 settings locations, into high position locations through A itself. Remember I told you about to go through pi and you understand what A is? A is the apple, A is the airplane, okay? So A is the air itself. That's 3 signals, lines of triangulation, lines of pi. That's all through A. And you go through B, C, all the way to Z and Z. that communication lines of high centers of travel that put you in super lines of communication, how to use that, and identification codes that modifies your systems, your binaries, your cortex, and your set position locations that put you in codification systems all through your algorithms. Directing ground sending calculation lines, how to set the webbing signal and location system all through tractions. All right, so set calculation lines of 24 lines. We've got 24 line sequence. That gives us 25 signals. Now we position lines at 20. I'm going to wait till it gets to 30. That's going to process lines at 18 value. And that position lines at 4 sequence lines of pi. Okay, nothing in clocking at all. Okay, so it's much easier to understand the space line and really understand how to use imagination lines to infinity systems and positioning your items. Directing ground centers calculation lines. So we got 4 lines of platforms, 1 signal offline, 8 signal rotation center to the surface. Calculating ground centers, we have 5 line signals at 2. Remember, it's all connected and modified. Lines line directing signal location of its link, process lines line communication setting to its network. And that communication lines have 4 channels, 3 centers, and 4 set positions. The operation line ground centers has 144 flux over screen adaptation system while through traction. Directing ground centers, we have 24 line signals, 24 lines measure, set position on 25, take 25 line centers, 30 over the line signals, set lines of flux over screen, and position line 8 lines of measure, 1 line grounds, set position lines of 4 setting, a scale communication system attraction, all done by equation. Okay? And this is what you have to understand how you use it through your super of its consciousness. Super consciousness is going above the system, beyond the system, I am the system. Now, understand how to modify that is how to take 24 lines of signature lines of grounds into a simulator. Okay, knowing exactly how to go through 1/3 ground. And the more you use your imagination, the more it gets easier without thinking. 13 times 13, times sequence, times 1, times calculation, times centers, times operation, times positions, square root, pattern lines, signature lines, 007. Calculation lines, box frame. So you're constantly moving. Schumann resonance, alpha, delta, theta communication. All through signatures, lines of ground. Solar text, solar content, right? Change formation lines of grounds, high line signal, location, setting, measure, and scale. All right, so we got alpha lines, delta positions, process lines A lines of B. Now you have to get a correlation how E equals lines of question. Question marks the system already done through equations in travel in the communication. Okay? Here's the map and system lines of calculations. In travels, indirect signals, and grounds. Okay? Everything is its own set position location system of travel. Okay? So this was a box line. Now it's an E factor inside travel. All right? Okay, this was a Q screen. That's the direct lines into all waving center. It's now line communication to all line connection umbrella. Directing lines in E force, process lines to platforms into configure system 1 traction. So getting into this super consciousness is identifying everything of what it isn't and identify what it is to its true form. Remember I told you about when I put something up, you see the 4, and all of a sudden it's not a 4, it's always an L. See, that's what you get in modifying. Get a more information system, understand how to use that into the super of its consciousness through its communications of its unification setting through its ascension. Okay? Never put titles and labels of anything in any line rotations. Break these things down in coordination system off the graphs. 4 graphs of screens, 3 centers of measure. 4 graphs of screens. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 graph screens. 3 measures. 6 rotations. Set position of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 platforms. E factors over 1 and factors over a screen. Directing ground centers, 1 and 3 set tractions. Directing ground centers calculation lines, here's a portal, stargate, and rotation coming in travel. So you constantly get into the story, faster. Operation line sequence, panel lines, operation lines of grounds, and that communication high interference, change communication lines of time frame, and box frame locations of the platform. Platforms over lines, course centers lines of travels into an energetic dome and location grid and travel communications. Directing ground centers, securing lines of positions, operation line sequence line communications. Online centers, online sequence coming into position. Here's a car, and direct signals and location setting. All right. Sets calculation lines, vortex out of screen, in position and set lines of 4 flux, half pipe over 3 over 6, travels in point lines of graph, back and center of operation. Okay. Inside communications. There's the map and set position. Okay. All through travel, all through recognition. Okay. Highways of indication setting is an example of how to use your networks and travel communications. all through center operation, all through traction, all through locations. Okay? So the higher you go, the more you basically, your voice comes more clarity, more focus, more supercharged. Highway sending line communication system, right? Now, I'm going to talk really fast, okay? And you're going to modify the line signals or line signatures through alpha, delta, and theta. So I'm just going to stay with alpha, delta, theta. So the more you get into alpha, delta, theta, then you understand how to go to higher lines of sequence. All right, so here we go and travel in that positions, right? 37 set location lines and position lines of travel, directing and ground, position lines, operation lines of sequence. Process communication line in the line rotates with the second lines of travel. Communication high centers, line communication high position location, high position location, line communication high center location sending. So in that position, you come into hieroglyphics. The process communication lines is harmonics over setting and rotation servers and traction. Your indication decision, there's your map and set in position. Inside, right? All through configuration system, all through travel. Routes to routers, location setting, right? So now you're working inside your body of communication. Inside. So it gets more complicated when you talk faster because now you connect to the atoms. Atoms lines of one signal, one ground, one server, one location setting. Divots over transition locations. 10,000 line position lines of high core centers lines of travel. Direct lines of solar line communication setting calculations. So you're adding signature lines into the atom lines. It's sending lines all that communication sending when you come in that position location of space and time. So it changes position of the time frame, change course center line communications. Now I'm going to travel through 3 line setting location lines and just locate towards molecules or locations into cell lines. Bridging screens, 3 centers, line can equalize the square roots. Now I communicate to the molecular structures inside my travel because I brought it in. Don't break it in, it's not there. All right, so signature lines of grounds, high signature lines of position, solar content. Process line indicates setting is 0 to 7. Copy that over that, location lines, repeat position location the ground center location setting, pop a uniform line position all levels, alto golf, and communication lines of travel. Directing ground centers to calculate these lines, umbrella and sequence, line communication system, alpha configuration system and travel. That my equation. Face recognition. Okay? Face recognition, everything you do in travel. Okay. Signature grounds, set lines on all communication high centers, puts every location into processing. Let's get into 17 grounds. Let's get into 4 scales. And let's get in position of all 32 lines in process of, let's get in line position of 40 setting scales and process lines of 4 measure and set positions into, let's overline this setting 17 at lines of 18. So I'm adding frames and equations, right? So the higher you go in the mind, the more you come into the imagination and the more you come into all of us out of the body sequence. Now, the more you come into the mind, the more you travel through light. And the more you travel through light, the more you stand through operation. The more you travel through operation, the more you come in projection. Then you come out of projection, out of the mind, just the mind itself. So you come into all of us how to come into the mind of collaboration and partnership. So you're getting higher lines of higher communication and partnership with a cup that processes its angles, that processes communication system all through settings, operation sequence, say communication and travel, directing ground center line communication system all through travel and the communications, right? So it has direct line link, process lines of grounds, signature lines, operation lines, sequence inside rotations, 3 grounds of service, 3 travels, 3 travel communication inside rotation, travels point lines of ground outside line communication setting, the 3 measure and scale, sets lines of travels and direct signal lines of grounds. Now, this is all through a coffee cup. So the coffee cup is in this position now. Now the coffee cup is in this position, right? So now the coffee cup is in this position. So it's showing me exactly what it can do in a higher force of communication, right? It's amazing when we just really understand what it is through face recognition. Okay, setting lines of platforms of 3 centers in travel communications. Ground centers lines of 1, process lines of 2, and so the connections of its angle is now facing this way. Okay, in that position. Now it's traveling in the opposite direction, going this way. So right now, the cup that's right here is now moved. Mind over matter. So it's really interesting. I see the cup in this angle, but now it's instantly moved. It's moved its angle, which is very powerful. And it's in real time, real scale, real balance, real communication of operation through its super of its consciousness. It has no signal line condition setting, but now it's in position over crossing line centers. High center line communication setting. So it's process lines that indicates it's setting more levels at the left than left lines of communication over lines of right. Process in that position lines of travel. Okay? Very powerful stuff. So I move that cup. It was in the center. Now it's moving over to the left. And it's automatically done. So what you have to start identifying is how that comes into position in mind over a sequence. Now, in that communication comes in aligns the center location of travel. So it's very powerful when we start recognizing things that we see, things, locations, all levels of its convocation and being aligned communication to its levels of consciousness, being aware, and how we come into that positions. So everything you channel, it channels you and higher frequency lines of grounds. Setting lines of panels operate in the set location system of travel. So 4 signatures, 3 centers of travel, outline center line communication system with 3 communication calculations. Okay, 3 box frames and set travel communications. Okay, all right, so we got dimensional 1, dimensional 2, dimensional 3, and travel communications. All right, then we have direct line link, cross lines of ground calculation lines. And then we have high signature lines of 1, process lines of 2, process lines of 6. So you're constantly creating formulas at different levels of frequencies. Box frames, triangulation frames, operation frames, correlations to track frames, directing ground centers, half pipe, set location of travel. Okay, high signature lines, communication setting. There's your mapping system and calculation. Powerful stuff. Inside lines. Very powerful stuff. X3000 comes in, X3000 comes in, X3000 comes in 7 positions. So as soon as you bring anything in from the inside of you, X3000 are on standby. Making sure you know what you're doing, knowing exactly what you're touching, why you're touching this, why you're touching there, what's going on here, what's in the configured system, what's in this system, what's in that setting, all through frequencies. All through maps, all through travel, all through calculation setting. All right? Setting line communication system, all through travel communications. Okay? All right. So once we identify that our mapping is all done through its equation, it's much understanding how to use that in all formation system through all calculated modified through a simulator and set positions. All you got to understand is how to communicate to anything in travel. Box frame, triangulation frame. Simple, right? And then we turn the page, turn the system, line condition setting, box frame, triangulation, down frame, right? So that's the calculation setting, box frame, triangulation of side frame. Okay, so it's really understanding to the other side line communication. So it's constant line of formation lines of grounds, position of sequence, positions of panel, operation lines, operation sequence, operation line conditions, and formation lines of communication. So all you're indicating is lines of laser. Everything's connected, every dot. Every dot is connected to every line is connected to every signature. Every signature is connected to every operation system locations. All through traction applications. There's your mapping, there's your webbing. That's your webbing. You know, you work within that line. All right, and then you add your planets. Where are you going to put your planets in sequence, in triangulation? Change time frame, change the clock line, condition setting, configuration lines of position. All right, color it in. Now once you color it in, it's in station. It's hotel golf. And set lines of travel. Okay, so it probably recognizes your settings of travel communications. Directing links, process indicates in system alterations. All right, so if you want to change the planet, you have to do it now, because if not, it locks the systems. So you want to change it, you change it over lines of sequence. Cross lines indicates in system 1/6. Now, you leave it there, it stays there. If not, it disappears, and you'll see it disappear. That means you got to do everything all over again, go back into positions, retrack location, reconfigure and send your failsafe back in 0 in gravity. Everything has to go back to 0. That process line communication is back in configuring location, setting how to use it in your CPU, understand how to online communication system, all through tractions, all through operations. So it has direct line link, direct line panel. Process indication lines. Now this overrides the system back in travel. Okay, so that's going to position lines of purple. Okay, set positions, which is Venus. Venus is going to stay there. I'm not moving it. Locking settings. Then we come to position location of Mercury. Mercury is downshifting over cross line condition setting configuration. Change the time scale. Change the clock and line communication setting and travel. Right. Bring it inside line condition system. Okay, modify lines of travel. Directing angles. Set communications. Now I'm going to set up the solar system. Now once I set the solar system, it's locked in frame. Balance frame lines, flex over line, 1 rotation, spin cycles, and travel. Okay, sets calculation grounds, sets communication high centers, and locates setting high position and travel. Process and setting line rotations. Sending over line centers, inline grounds, line condition nebula. There's nebula and set lines of sequence. There's nebula and cross line condition lines of 12. There's nebula line course centers of 24 lines of scale. There's nebula line position locations into 144 platform position locations in travel. Now I'm going to indicate the system all through inside rotation to its webbing system and track communications. Next line is setting. Very powerful when you come in your highways in your calculation system, all through your planetary alignments in 24 lines of pi. So you split lines anomalies. Now the team has to understand the center operation system. Let's go instructions. Directing centers and location of center operation. That's you. You do not leave. You are the spin cycle. You are the axle. You are the center operation that puts everything inside, that operates the center, and everything that projects everything outside. So you are the coil. You are the spring. You are the balance. You are the center of operation of anything. So in that position, changing here, changing here, changing here, changing here, expanding one line center. Change graph lines, set course centers at different time measure and scale of communications. Now the process lines and inner centers, location setting, Colossus is communication to its black hole of center operation. Travels endpoint lines graph, offline center, inside rotation system, intra communications. Setting line communication lines and settings. In that communication system, all through traction, all through locations, is Skynet location setting and travel. Very powerful stuff. All right, so set calculations. Ground center is a surface, location system, and calculation. Okay? So, clocking your centers through pi, now you indicate one process of 3. Set lines of 6 over 8, 12, and 24 as set travel. Okay, so you have inventory lines of 1/3, one graph, one center, one operation sequence, into coordinates of correlation setting of 0 gravity, of 0 energy, and 0 fields in set position. So, as we go into the ground, so we change the time scale that communicates the system, and this word comes in all on course centers, line calculation setting a part of acceleration system all through line centers, sending 1/3 lines into position of 1/6 over screen adaptation. The calculation ground centers over lines of signals. Now we set the patterns in 3 centers of travel. Calculate and modify. This is where you come everything through attraction that comes to you, not through chasing. So the inner locks, in-line communication, time locks, time sequence lines of clocking lines, the operation sequence correlates a system of time scale that processes communications inside travel. Calculate and modify inline rotations to its Skynet in set position. There it is. Boom, look at that. Whoa. Change time frame, change correlations, and time calculations. Okay, all through platforms. Outside and inside. All right, everything's outside, everything's inside. We understand inside itself, outside and inside locations. Change time frame, change calculations, change communication center, inference location system attraction. Okay, very powerful stuff. All inside position area, solar systems, all through pi. All right, so how you guys set up your test is really understand how to go through 24 lines of simulator. Know exactly how to go through 24 lines of time and 144 platform. All right, very powerful when you come in that position location with sending all the calculations. All right, all through traction, all through locations. All right, but you always have to identify inside line conditions, guys. Okay, know exactly how everything's set up in set positions. That's processing you already in the sim, so you already know what you've already done in that position. So it's pretty easy to understand that through a graph communication with setting. But you always go inside and see everything in travel. And what it's doing through calculations. Now, once you get into that, then you come into this positions. You see everything outside. It basically puts everything inside travel, all through communications. So this is stuff you already know. But now you have to understand editing, time positions, time locking, time screens, get into the coordinates line communication system. So come into computer lines and rotation lines of screen adaptation of 3 centers. Computer, right? Indicate lines of flux over 3 centers of travel. Okay? Directing lines, simulation line, convert lines of travel. Change time frame. Locking screens adaptations. Flux over 3. Process line indicates settings of travel communications inside, outside location setting of travel. Right? Directing ground sense timelines of sequence line communication lines of travel. Platforms over 1, center operation lines of 3 centers of 4 set tractions. Directing lines into positions of 3 centers line communication lines of travel. Calculating the center operation lines, energetic domes, and rotation surface of travel communications. Sets operation lines directing compass and rotation setting, inside and outside, outside in. Location grid, rotation line, security line, visitor location system, all through attractions. Okay? So that's how you start to see everything outside from inside, right? So the faster you go, the more you connect. The more you connect, the more you divide. The more you divide, the more you balance. The more you balance, the more you see things outside, inside rotation that's already set up through its equation, outside traction. Okay? Very powerful stuff. Okay, drop in the ball. Center lines the earth, rotate the surface. Now rotate the surface, lines position location of 17 hours in frame. Process indicates ascending of platforms and track communications. Directing ground centers highlights the sequence location of galaxy lines of alignment. Process indication setting. Drop the ball again. Earth line 1, rotation lines of circuits. Set sequence lines of panel, seconds over minutes, 0 field energy, clock lines of foundation of 0 gravity in set positions. Okay? So, what we have to start to identify is the story of information. All through attractions, all through locations. How fast you can go through your superconsciousness that just keep constantly creating stories of mechanisms of power that recognizes your time frame and your alignments that you've already gone through in set travel, in set position. Okay? And then we coordinate the timeline, change the communication lines of time frame. Okay, change the course centers of time calculation of time frame, and part of acceleration setting. We overcross line 3 signature lines of Earth and rotation lines of track communications. Directing ground centers lines of sequence in location system all through travel. Look how powerful that is. Now to see that is from inside rotation. All through tractions, all locations. See down different 45 angles and rotation setting. Okay? Look how powerful that is. Okay? Oh, it disappeared. It disappeared. Where'd it go? Back in sequence, back panel, back in operation line screen. Okay? Imagine it disappeared. Where'd it go? Now it's back. Whoa. Something now does configuration lines of balance, location of flow, and position lines of travel through the line communication system. So the harder you guys go through your super consciousness, the more you have to identify your system of power, what you can do with power. Having power is knowing how to use the power, but to understand how the power is you're already knowing the power. See, that's what you got to get in positions of and settings. Where great power becomes great responsibility, all through set positions. So now you understand why everything starts to disappear around you, because it's not superly consciously aware of you yet, until you understand you're already superly consciously aware of yourselves. The more you identify yourself, the more you identify you are. Right? So there's no lost signal or anything in transitions and transition action locations. Okay. Let's get a bypassing 3 centers of travel. So remember, it's always lines of communication, lines of storylines. 3 signals, 3 grounds, 3 surface, and 3 rotations in the box frame. So the more you have fun, the more it gets easier to understand how to get in position of higher levels of balance. And then you add the equations, 48 scale into 30 set line sequence, into 18 lines of value, into 8 volume and set operation. Now that's all positions through the phone line. So I can set the phone line in sequence here in panel, all through the phone. That's what I'm getting, connection settings and travels. 3 signals, 3 ground centers of surface. Processing occasional lines of flux over screen, a 3 center line communication in the configuration, all through my phone. Change ground centers line communications inside rotation setting of travel. Directing grounds, graph 1, graph 2, graph 3, graph 4, graph 5, graph 6, set positions. Crossing angles, 45 angles. Set lines of webbing, rotation lines, circuits, and location system and calculations. There it is, outside and in. Outside, inside, outside. See? Outside is this. Outside is this, okay? And then you go from inside, okay, to outside. It's crazy how it looks, all through setting. Pretty powerful stuff how you recognize these things in door frames and recognize the time frames in location setting and graph frames. Look how powerful that is. Look how powerful that is. All through graph, all through screen, all through the application, all through the VR. And then basically you can put yourself here and you're seeing everything through observation with your sim. That's you. Okay, teleport here in the center. Getting ready to supercharge your system and travel. Go from here to here, right? Rotate cycles, line condition setting. You disappear, part accelerates in 3 centers of travel. Direct setting lines to grounds. Calculate and modify. You want to see Jupiter. There's Jupiter and setting travel. Okay, offline condition setting. Jupiter is going to cross line and lines across fractal location of time. So it says position here, morphed into here, teleportation here, into Pluto, and set travel in that rotation set calculations. So it's very powerful. And when you see the simulation of you inside line condition with VR self. So in line communicates inside and rotation setting and attraction. Okay? So you're going to see more of that through volume and mass. Okay? So you guys have 24 lines of simulation lines of pi. You just have to understand how to basically see yourself more living in the actual sim and seeing it through supposition, all through box frame of a window frame, guys. That's box frame, window frame. Okay? This is their central frames, docking frames, and square root. Okay? Indicate lines of ground centers, line condition setting. Cross lines of levels into panels of operation. Okay, change time frame. There it is. There's your mapping system lines of calculation, inside traction. Right? Now, again, you're here. Now, let's get into platform over setting, platform over C, platforms over center, and platforms over D in traction. Now, we're going to cross the angles, sending sequence lines of communication system and set position 4 over 5 in track location. Now, sending communication lines of 1, cross lines, indicate system and set positions. 1, 2, and 3 centers of scales and position of 3 platforms in travel communications. All right, sets lines, there it is in set position. Okay, now you can work it on different angles. It's amazing how you platitude your location system off of travel. So it's all about understanding how to change the formation of its grounds and energetic line screen, but work with inside the location of its mapping system because it's much understanding how to use that through attraction. And you change the formation of its grounds under its settings. It's very powerful how you work from inside lines of a box frame or main frame or a track frame or correlations or human line core centers. Calculates lines. So, come into the H-line screens, into unifications, into its minds, into its atmospheres of its network. Okay? Human. Platforms A, AC, unification lines grounds, high signals, modification lines of 2 M's, cross lines of 3 centers of travel, atmosphere lines, networks over line rotation service, implication system, H-line over cross-line condition setting your pyramid. There's your pyramid. Now, cross-line calculation setting, and that indicating system all through travel. So the more you go through super consciousness, the more you division location system, and you get and modify how to codify things a lot faster in travel communications. Okay? So everything from outside becomes inside, all through graph, all through subject, position, and travel. Right? And then you work with that, see? Look how powerful that is. You see in the pyramids and line signal. All right, then we add one here, let's add another one here, let's add another triangulation there and setting. All right, so you're indicating lines of platforms now. Let's put the triangulation lines of pyramids all over the set locations. And then we set up the laser lines, laser track communications. Okay, so basically here, locking here, travel. That's what a pyramid does in rotations. Then we set up this line of travel communications. Directing lines and link, your process line that indicates the setting of center operation lines. Travel point lines of graph, you measure the scales. Process lines of center operation line sequence. You're now in the center operation of you, looking and observing everything locates to its setting. Okay? So start to see yourself more in the VR system. Okay? That's what you have to start identifying. How it operates you in set travel. Okay? Now, if you understand that, then you understand more how it all works in set calculation. Okay? And that's where it comes in the graphs. The Schumann graph, the correlation graph, the center graphs. It's all through box and set position and setting, right? Cross and angles, you see the open sequence. So if the box is open and not closed, still work with it. You don't have to box it in, right? You're doing it in set position, in settings, right? If you try to fix it, well, that's intelligence on its own setting. It doesn't like what you're doing through equation. right? But I like the open sequence. That's me doing it. So you have to identify what you're doing through your own superconsciousness. And once you understand what you're doing through your own superconsciousness, everything around you works with you in pattern and balance. Then you send the signature lines, the ground center location setting, that configures the setting to its umbrella, directing ground centers in the operation line sequence location system all through tractions and set position to a land. Process lines of indication setting, process lines, a coil, directing the line course centers and line communication setting in position location system to its light bulb and travel. Sets calculation ground centers into 4 tethers, rotation lines of box frame and travel communications. Positive outline centers of 3 signatures, location setting into pi generation screen adaptation. Process inline rotation lines to its mapping sequence through pi. Okay? All through traction, all through locations. All through setting, all through operation. Okay? Change communication lines of time frame, particle line, acceleration system, and travel. Okay? Set lines, course centers, and direct setting locations lines of communication lines of travel. Okay? So try to understand how to use the graph lines and how to get net communication lines of service. So there's a lot of things you can indicate all through setting, all through operation, all through sequence, all through positions, all through calculation in your simulation. See? You can see this is the VR, right? Everything's in the VR. So if you understand the graphs, then it gets much easier as you see it in screen adaptation systems, all through settings, all through flux. In that communications, in that operation line positions, travel. Okay? So it's important you have to set up the holographic grid, which is the box frame. So that's 4 rulers and set the sequence. Okay? Set lines, let's go through A, B, and C, D, E, 1. Okay? Now, you can do anything lines and line interference. So I can have 0, 1s of travel, and I got a triangulation box here. Remember, ruler 1, ruler 2, basic lines. So we've got a ruler 1 of indications, and we got ruler 2 communication lines of grounds. Now, the high sequence off lines ascends to 3 centers of scale. That process lines, indication lines of 2, formation lines of scale. Sets calculation lines of alpha line, delta, and 3 line position lines of scale. Sets communication line grounds and location system, and your graph communication, your brainwave and pattern. Boom. There's your brainwave pattern. So that's alpha, delta, and theta communications. Okay? Booyah. Now, offline, you can go in the opposite direction signals. This puts channels, operation line, calculation lines. So you get communication line up, line position of beta wave, off line communication. Ground centers, line connection, cross line angles, line connection omega, offline setting, inside rotation center and circuits. Ground center line communication lines in position of its mapping sequence, all through your line connection setting to your weapon system of your Skynet and travel. Booyah. Setting calculations, you add your planets in set position. All through traction, off locations. Okay, your planets are there now, right? Look at that in travel. And look at that in travel. That's all through 4 rulers in set position. Now, what is that in position lines of setting? Say hello to location setting. Say hello to the dolphin. Okay? Dolphin comes in. Here's the water containment setting. Right? I sequence lines of panel. Process line indicates the system off through travel. Directing lines. Here's the pyramid and travel. There's the pyramid. Right? Platforms, E factors, settings, screen adaptations, attractions of flux. Process lines of indicating system all through dimensional door lines of screen adaptations of flux. Setting course lines of time lines of change communication lines of wave and screen adaptations of flux. So I'm just trying to get you guys to understand how to use this in superobus consciousness and set positions. Okay? All right, so signature lines of grounds. I like to work with the connection system so it's easy to understand how to use 3 signature lines of grounds, time frame line, position lines, and 0. Well, 0 is here, 1 signal is over here, 2 is over attractions, 3 lines of measures, and this question lines is marked, triangulation lines of 1, equals lines of 1, equals lines of 2. Process lines, divide line settings, 0 position lines of 1, process lines of 0. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. It's easy to do these things because you know what you're doing through its equations when you can hire communication of super consciousness. So ground lines of 2, Z-force, line course centers and positional location to its position and proficiency. Set course centers lines of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Sets travels 45 line angles. Setting course lines and communication across angles and flux over lines, pixelation graphs. Holographic grid. There's a hologram. There's the actual energy dome, right? But you also see from inside what you see from outside. See? And then you're standing here in set positions. It's operation sequence. Okay? Understanding what you're seeing from inside line conditions, outside tractions, guys. Right? Rotation spins, portal settings, operation sequence panel. Indicate lines, travel through it, and line position location measure, outline signals and ground centers, outline signal location system, back and tractions. Okay? Travel through 3 portals, back and set. Author operation and set travel. Right? But look what you do in set positions. Back towards Earth. But you also see inside. So, everything I do is a process of everything you already know in set tractions, guys. So, solar lines, square root, square pi, course centers of product acceleration lines of time, measure, and scale. XT1000. Process lines indicates the setting of flux line, pyramid activation screen locations of platforms over setting. Process of engine location setting, platforms over C line course centers. Another XT1000 common information system all through travel. Travel with point lines of graph, 3 lines of signatures, 4 lines of signals. Set line, course centers, line of time, position, location, measure, and scale. Look at all those position of XT1000s all through this pyramid screen. So you're constantly changing stories. Every second, every minute, every hour, your set position lines of travel. And the more you identify things, the more you come into graph. Your central graph, your main graph, your correlation graph, communication lines, graphs, your CPU graphs, everything is set position, location, measure, and scale. And this is all happening on your Earth in set position, inside your Earth. Okay? All through setting, all through operation. Energetic dome. Working from inside lines of the dome. Okay? Working with inside line communication of the dome. Working inside position location, your Earth, and set tractions. Oh yeah. So it gets more complicated, but it's a lot more fun now. Because you're coming into your lines, high centers of super conscious, now to be consciously aware of everything you come into travel of. If we get a center line communication line that's a circle, and we get another line position line that's a circle, and then we get another line set lines of circle, and 4 lines of circle, 6 lines of circle, 8 lines of circles in travel. Has a direct line link, it processes lines of Fibonacci lines 1, 2, 3, 6, 8 lines of 12. Complicated stuff, but it's a lot of fun. Change the angles, set positions. Here's your mapping sequence, lines of pi. Complicated stuff, same line course centers, line communication lines of pi. All through Skynet. Set lines of planet here. Okay, so now it's in position location. This is Pluto. Okay, don't change it, leave it there, right? Change communication lines of time measure, outline signals. Sets position location of Jupiter. Okay, cross angles, process lines, signal lines of green over line, signal location inside outline conditions heading travel. Sets position lines of time scale. There's the position location in your solar system. There's your planets. Now, platforms over setting, green line screens, platforms over the center, process lines, green line screens, process lines, operation lines, of green lines, galaxy lines of alignment. Process indicates in system of the calculations. Okay, so we go through lines of platforms, process lines of 3 centers of travel before set position. Indicate grounds, location grid, over cross-line condition setting of travel. Sets communication high centers, location system, wind cycles, oscillations, oscillators, rotation lines, spin set position to a system of planetary alignment. Sets calculation ground, centers, location system of travel. Sets communication lines, here comes the solar lines, solar streams, and solar system and communications. Okay, outside settings, inside rotation. All through traction, out locations. Okay? So you can put your planets anywhere, but you have to send the structures and location system to the Schumann resonance and all position location system and travel. Okay? Very important to understand that in that position. Okay? Inside positions. And outside through tractions, all through road graphs, screen graphs, calculations. All right, so let's change the time frame. Existing information lines of settings lines of pyramids. Indicate 1, 2 hieroglyphics, line counters, settings of data, process lines, setting line conditions, system of travel. Directing door lines and rotation lines of spins, process lines of indication system. 3 centers of measure, 3 centers of scale, process lines of 3 set calculations. 3 grounds, high signals in location system, auto setting, auto operations. Okay, there's your planets. Okay, so 9 sequence. Now I'm bringing it in frame now. Wasn't there, it is now. Okay, and we've got 2 orange lines of sequence. Just because of the same color doesn't mean they're the same intelligence. Nope. I don't see it as, but I see it on the platform of what it isn't, or what it always is in tractions. So this is Jupiter, and this is Venus. So you don't get confused with the color. Now I'm going to add the equations of Pluto, which is going to be red, and they're going to allocate another line position to copy and paste of Pluto. And get the 3 centers lines of 3 communication lines of Pluto, and they set tractions. 13 ground centers change the time frame again, sets routers and routers location setting through its graph. Sets calculation lines, solar systems coming in, constellation lines of 1, 2, platforms over 6. Sets travels point lines graph, energetic 1, energetic 2, process lines of clocking line, 0 gravity, set core centers of fields of energy. Sets calculation screen lines inside the rotation system, all through settings, all through Skynet. Okay, very complicated stuff, right? So it just gets more complicated, your drawings and set tractions. Okay, so I've showed you so much for you to identify these things and how to set up through all line position your schematics, understand your primers, and know exactly how to indicate that position location of 24 lines of pi. Start with the center, and you go to position of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24 pieces of pie. That's 24 pieces of pie. Right? Let's change the angle. Now, it's not 24 pieces now, is it? Look at it. It's a solar panel. It's a wind factor. It's a correlation system. It's a solar fan. It's a high calculations. It's direct line and link. It's not a process of 20 lines of pi. Look, it's coming together, see? If I keep waving screens, you start to see the mechanism lines of travel, how it correlates the system lines of calculation setting and time position lines of scale. See, it changes its position lines of time and scale. Process line indicates the system. Again, changes communication setting and travel. See the intelligence formations. Bring it in, there's the intelligence. Okay? So never think you're always in a 24 lines of pi. So I'm constantly doing this. It's rotating the spin cycles, and that communicates the system all through tractions. Okay? See? It's forming into its own setting now. See the webbing system? You see how the pies are changing correlation lines of setting? Okay, so let's go through 1/3 6 in set position, echo, and sonar. Flux over 3 centers. And then we go through pi lines of 1/6 over frame and set tractions. And then we go through 1/3, 1/6, 1/8 of a pi and travel. Okay, and this is all through clocking. All right, so we got 2 lines of scale, 4 centers, 5 set lines of sequence for communication. Okay, and then we change the angles, point lines of graph of indication setting of wires of signatures and travel. Okay, we indicate time frame, locate the setting, the lock the sequence lines of particle acceleration lines of setting. Okay, so now we have 1, 2, 3 lines of platforms of setting. Pyramid, there it is. There's your pyramid. Laser track centers, 3 centers of indication system, right? Laser track interference, hypothesis location of travel. Calculate and modify. Inside the lines, pyramid 1, pyramid 2, pyramid 3, and pyramid 4. And set travel communications. Okay, indicate grounds, XT1000. Mothership on standby. And set communications. All right, look at that in equations. Very powerful in set positions, guys. Very powerful in set positions, guys. Very powerful in set positions, guys. Look at that. Booyah. Look at that. Now you got a spaceship line. Correlation lines of track center, variance, command center. Booyah. And a pyramid below. And a mothership on standby. So we're going to change the mothership, flick the switch, offline center, inside rotation setting calculations. Remember, they can line signals in line communications. Here's another mothership over line course centers of Earth line rotation. Travels in point lines graph, directing ground centers to set position with operation sequence. Booyah. But it calculates modifies to its pyramid, right? And direct setting lines of grounds. So all you guys are doing is creating stories that benefit you, and understand how to supercharge your system is knowing how to use that. And line screen adaptation system, all through setting of its eye attractions, all through the eye, all through the eye. It's all through the eye, guys. Okay, all through the eye. Look at that. This is all through the eye, happening all through the eye itself, just the eye itself. All this activity, all this is happening through the eye itself. Okay, inside the eye, inside the eye. Very powerful stuff. And how you see it on different angles inside the eye. Okay, very powerful. Recognizing timelines, high centers, high sequence, high panels, operates, locates, and system, all through attractions, all through the eye. Okay, inside communications. All right. Now, that's our direct line link. That's the course center line connection setting. And set positions. 4 signature lines of grounds. And set travel. Right? Inside the eye. Okay. Light shades and shadows. Let's bring in the floaters. Floater 1, floater setting, floater sequence, floater panel. Light signals coming in attractions. Now we're going to bring in box frames. Box frames over setting, set sequence over 3, over travels, and direct line and link. So everything is processed in the eye. Eyes are the windows of the soul. So understand that kind of very setting. Correlates the cataracts, lines of signals, locates the system, all through attractions. All through sending operation. Signal lines of 1, process lines of computer framing, 3 centers of flux. All through the eye. Correlates and line centers, line condition setting into the green line sequence, into the cataracts, locates the system, all through travel. All through the eye in set position. Okay, it's amazing how you can change the eye lines. But it's all in process of the eye itself, guys. Look at this. Look at inside line condition simulation. This is your simulation inside the eye line. Booyah. That's a lot of activity going inside the eye. Look at that. Whoa. Oh, wow. Look at this. What do we got here? What is this? What's going on there? What's happening there? What is this? What's going on? What is this? What's going on here? What's happening here? See the intelligence? What is that? What does that look like to you? What it is, what it is, what it is. It is what it is, what it is, right? So it's just trying to understand what it means to you. Is information system of its grounds that track locations. Okay? Very powerful when you see it in all formation lines of setting, guys, inside the eye. Everything happens inside the eye. So once we understand that, I understand more lines of communication setting, all graph communication system with attractions. Okay? You really bring it in. Look at this. You really bring it in. You really, really bring it in. Oh, what's going on there? Oh, it looks like your Earth. It's like, oh, how's he doing that? Well, it's not exactly what you calculate and modify through your attractions. Attracting ground centers, line sequence, lines, position, location, system. What's going on with my eye? What's going on with my eye? And what's going on with my eye itself and travel. Okay? So when you bring things in, you start to recognize it. What is in set positions? Right? All through attraction, all locations. Very powerful stuff, right? Now it's in its cosmos. So everything is processed from inside, line sending off the attractions. Right? And then we change the core centers of time frame again. Okay, everything's regular timelines, existing, everything happening all at once, but you can add frames, lines, positions, levels, and change communications of settings. Process indicates the system. Now look at your eye line communications all through travel. All through directions, all locations. Right? Processing line centers, Fibonacci line, rotation, inside travel communications. Okay? It's amazing how you see it from inside line of the eye itself. But when you bring it in, oh, look at that, it disappeared. Where'd it go? We're going to do it again. You're not ready to see it and travel. because everything happens inside the eye. Look at the mechanism of laser on that traction. Whoa! Let's set up some laser lines. Process of 1, process of 2, process of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. There's your pyramid, all through laser. Look at the pyramid, look at the retraction, look at the action projection, action travel sign, position location, outline setting. Let's bring it out. Oh, what do we got here? There's the pyramid outside looking in. Look what you created. Look what you created in your reality. All right, so let's change timeline again. And we're going to cut various lines of pixelation grounds. Cross lines of 1, cross lines of 2, and cross lines of 3 of center. So now you understand why it's so important of what you're bringing in through the mind projection. That's what you see in tractions. Creating things from outside, guys, in your reality in set position. Okay, through a pyramid. It's that travel. Okay? Now when you ground it, you put it where you want to put it. Let's get a calculation of recourse lines at grid signals. Center lines at 3 centers of travel and net communications. Right? And now we're just going to go through platforms. 3 centers of communications and setting. Okay? Now we're going to go through, let's say, we'll go through orange lines of signals, and location of grounds, and set trajectories. Then we can position lines of high positions, all levels. Let's get into line position, location, line position of pink. Pink outline centers, line connection setting, and position location laser and scale. Oh, this is looking really nice. Look at this in eye division. And look at the eye division in this setting. Looking up, look what you create. Comes outside, your perception. There's your pyramid. You created it. Boom. Bring it in your reality. Bring it in your reality. How you see things in set position, guys. In set position. All through the eye. Okay? It's incredible when you do these things all through the eye itself. Woo! Okay? We'll stop there. This is the basics. This is super consciousness. Welcome to the set position of space-time operations. All through tractions, all through divisions, all through location setting, and eye lines of sequence and location to its provision. Okay? Very powerful when you see that. All right. See you guys in 5.